Hey, Stephen Young here at High Octane Classics in Auburn, Massachusetts with another high octane walk-around. This time, one of the greatest muscle cars in American history. No, we're not talking about a 442 or a Roadrunner or a Hemi Cuda. This is a 1987 Buick Turbo Regal. And we also know these, of course, as the Grand Nationals. And the mighty thing about these is the turbocharged 3.8 liter V6 under the hood. And in the 1980s, these, well, and the C4 Corvette were the most astonishing, meanest cars on the road in stock form. But just like old muscle cars from the 60s and early 70s, these electronic muscle cars, as we used to call them because they had computers on board, respond just as well to tuning. And we'll get into that. Now, of course, this one here is a black T, a T-type. It's not a Grand National. You could get these in black if you wanted. It's slightly customized. And when I talk about day two modifications, we're talking about the weld aluminum wheels, front and rear, which are actually as attractive as the standard T-type aluminum rims or the steel Grand National wheels, but even lighter. And, you know, reducing your unsprung weight is always a good thing if you want extra performance. This one does have the optional T-tops, which is a way that Buick gave buyers of the Regal the feel of a convertible while still meeting the federal rollover standards, which were very much in effect. They couldn't sell a convertible, but this is about the next best thing. And the rear quarters on these things, they bulge out like that. It might look like it's T-type only, but no, this is actually something found on Grandma's Regal as well. And again, it's a great look, and you can put plenty of tire under these. And again, another day two mod. We still have the weld wheel with the long wheel studs for NHRA compliance, but this is a DOT drag radial. Now, back in the 60s, wrinkle walls were the way to go. But as you get into the 1980s, radial tires and drag slick construction went hand in hand. The beauty of a drag radial is that it doesn't have the sidewall deflection of a wrinkle wall. You know, this thing would be swaying about a half a foot if this was a wrinkle wall with 8 pounds in it. But again, the beauty of the drag radial, as seen on a lot of modern computer muscle cars, is you can still drive around corners and get straight line traction. And again, the beauty of the T-type and the Grand National is the spoiler on the trunk, which sets it apart from Grandma's Regal Limited with the wire wheels. But the big thing about these cars is what's under the hood. Let's take a peek. And while the Turbo Regals are products of the 1980s, they made use of something that all 60s muscle cars had, a styled steel hood. Here it is, the bulge right here, seen on all Turbo Regals, and it's a sign if you're driving an IROC Z or a Mustang 5.0 from the 80s, don't mess around, because under the hood is a turbocharged 3.6 liter V6, or 3.8 liter V6, that's right, 3.8 liters. Now this one here, again, getting into that day two thing, has been pretty heavily modified, and that's cool. Now this is one of the High Octane Classics inventory cars. It's still being detailed and tidied up, but we can still work with it and learn from it. Now this, of course, is a lot of aftermarket plumbing right here, and something kind of telling is right here, this little turnbuckle, this thing here, this is a torque strap right here. This car makes so much torque, the driver's side motor mount perhaps has more play than you'd like. So this thing right here is a classic drag racer modification to keep the engine from rocking too far. That's a good sign if you ask me. And we get to the turbo on this and the plumbing, much larger than stock. If we look at the wastegate, we'll see the word Turbonetics on that. And of course, Turbonetics was founded by Bob Keller back in the 1970s. And before that, Bob Keller used to work with Hemi drag racer Bud Fauble, and they had a car called the Turbo Honker in 1965, twin turbos in a 426 Hemi. And again, Bob Keller founded Turbonetics, and if anyone's going to do an automotive turbo for drag racing, it's Bob Keller and Turbonetics. Now, the thing about this, we also see cast aluminum rocker covers or valve covers. There's push rods here, but this tells us this engine's definitely been out of here and has been blueprinted and extra power. And once again, in the same way you can take a GTO or a Buick GS 400 or 455 and add an Edelbrock intake and a Holley and some headers, you can do the same thing with 80s muscle cars. Took a little different skill set. They were computer controlled, and in some cases a laptop is required. For old school people like me, that was scary stuff, but the reality is this is now 30 plus years old, and the reality is electronics really saved performance. But as powerful as the T-Type and Grand Nationals were, they were also luxurious. We got to look inside, but before I leave this part, got to remind you, be sure to stick around to the end of this video to hear this crazy Turbo V6 roar to life. You're going to like it. Now, there used to be a saying, when better cars are built, Buick will build them. That was like the 1930s and 40s, but it spoke to the plushness of Buick, which was a step above Chevrolet and Oldsmobile, and not quite a Cadillac. But again, inside a Buick turbo car, even a turbo, any one of them, nice plush surfaces, softness on the doors, and really kind of the look of a luxury car. But again, the power of a Corvette, frankly, under the hood. But again, this one here has many day two touches, nothing wrong with that. Some autometer gauges, a tachometer, oil pressure, water temperature gauge, classic stuff. Also an alcohol injection unit right here. And a little a tuner here to allow less or more of the alcohol to go when you want it and need it. And inside of the console also, a little boost controller, I believe, right there. So you have lots of nifty little things that you can add to make a good thing even better. But I love the idea that every single one of these intercooled turbos had a little message right here under the dashboard that told you you're driving a turbo 3.8 liter Buick. Don't forget it, buddy. If you need to pass pretty much anything, you can do it in stock trim. And especially when day two modifications have been made like this one here, you can pass a lot of classic muscle cars with no problem at all. Computers really do make things better. But we can learn more about this car by opening the trunk. Let's look. And one of the nice things about the Regal is whether it's grandma's six-cylinder car or a Grand National or T-Type, nice big trunk with plenty of room for groceries. So if you're either a small family or a single person, you can use this as a daily driver and carry stuff around. But the more important thing we want to look at here is this. This is called the SPID, the Service Parts Identification Label. And on this thing, we can learn a lot, the A's, the B's, the C's. We can see first off LC2, right, okay, LC2 right there, that LC2, that says, yeah, this car was born with the intercooled V6 turbo engine for sure. And then we look for code Y56, and we see that right here. Where is Y56? But anyway, Y56 tells us this car was born as a Turbo T, or T-Type, I should say, not a Grand National. And then finally, something kind of weird, the G87 code will tell us this does have the heavy-duty 8.5-inch ring gear, which was standard fare, but we don't see G80. This car was actually built without a limited slip differential. Believe it or not, you did pay extra for a limited slip on a Grand National or a T-Type Buick back in the 1980s. And if you think that's weird, you gotta remember, same thing was true on an SS396, even a Roadrunner. You had to pay a little extra for a limited slip or posi. Even in the classic muscle car 60, same thing here. So this one does not have factory limited slip, but that's been fixed. Here's why. We look underneath this thing, and we can see the 8.5-inch ring gear, but there's also an aluminum girdle on the replacing the tin inspection cover, which stiffens it, and yes, an Auburn limited slip has been added to this car. So again, day two modifications make a good thing even better. And the great thing about the Buick turbo cars is that, you know, back in the 80s, there was a thing called the gas guzzler tax. The EPA and the DOT mandated if a car didn't get certain MPG or mile per gallon, you, the customer, would pay $750 out of your pocket. And of course, the manufacturer was also penalized. But thanks to the lightweight, the efficient fuel injection with electronics, these cars actually got away from the gas guzzler tax. So you had your cake and you ate it too. So the 80s weren't as bad as a lot of people like to try and make you think they were. Computer muscle cars like this made them way more fun than they could have been. If you like this car, you can check it out on the High Octane Classics website.